The following segment is sponsored by Wellgreen Platinum, trading in the U.S. as WGPLF and on the TSX as WG. Located in the Yukon Territory, Canada, the Wellgreen project has the potential to become one of the world's largest and lowest-cost open-pit producers of platinum group metals and nickel. Find them on the web at wellgreenplatinum.com.
David Morgan is an expert on silver, gold, and precious metals investments. He's a world-renowned lecturer appearing on CNBC and the Fox Business Channel. He's an author, having penned Get the Skinny on Silver Investing. And Mr. Morgan is a regular contributor and friend of the Ellis Martin Report.
David, welcome back to the program.
Oh, it's great to be back.
I was moseying around your website, silver-investor.com, came up with the silvermanifesto.com. It's a book you've written along with Chris Marchese. Let's talk about it.
When I originally published the first book, Get the Skinny on Silver Investing, it was by a publishing house, and they have a very strict format. It was kind of a takeoff on the Idiot's Guide series, roughly 100 pages, no graphs, no charts. And in my heart of hearts, I really wanted to write kind of the magnus opus on the silver market. And Chris, who's been working with us for quite some time, said, well, let's get started. So Chris really dug in and started the process. And he and I together took 9 months, and it's basically looking at the silver market from almost any aspect you can imagine, Ellis. The history of silver, silver as a monetary basis, the history of silver as United States money. Then we talk about the fractional reserve banking and economics, because it's important if you're going to understand how the markets are manipulated. You have to understand fractional reserve banking so you can understand bullion banking and the fractional reserve aspect of bullion banking. Then we went on to talk about how to choose a mining company. And then I wrote a closing chapter about Beyond Silver, which talks about what the monetary system has to do with conditions of the global economy and looking forward about the problems that we face and are experiencing with political, geopolitical problems, with war, this non-ending war, this humanity problem with, the rich getting richer, a lot of people that are not, that are barely making it, and on and on. So I looked at that question from about 3 or 4 different aspects with no answers, just questions, and suggested further reading into 3 gentlemen, women and men, 3 entities that have proposed ideas that I thought were of merit, that you could look at longer range. Where could we go as humanity if we start to really, 1, get truthful, and 2, start to really resolve some of these conflicts?
Now, you mentioned war in this conversation here. Do you think war is a driver or a non-driver? Can we exist as an economy without a war machine? I'm curious as to your thoughts on this, since you brought it up.
Well, that's a very good question, and these are my thoughts. I don't know if any economist could prove it or not, but obviously the paradigm that Chris Duane so eloquently states is a death and debt paradigm. All money creation is a result of going further into debt, and part of that equation is the military-industrial complex. And the military-industrial complex would really stagnate if all you did was build war machines and there was no war to use them. The way you sell these products is you have an actual war. Somebody says, oh, I need those jets, or I need those ships, or I need those bombs, or I need whatever. And so would the present economy exist without the war machine? I would probably say no. And I'd be pretty emphatic about that. And that's, again, goes to that last chapter with the big question of how do we restructure our priorities as humanity to get away from war? I mean, how human are we? Killing each other. I mean, every major religion says thou shalt not kill. You have these recently, these policemen that were killed, one in New York and one here in the Coeur d'Alene area, very near where I live, considered to be tragic. Big funerals, lots of hurt feelings, lots of emotion, and all that's valid. Yet at the same time, the United States is out there in, I think it's 52 countries, and there is some kind of skirmish, to put it in polite terms, or war is going on. And there's killing going on. It's almost a hypocritical stance, or, this killing is justified, but this one is not, and on it goes. I mean, basically, to the core of it, either killing is wrong or it isn't. So that's big problems. War is not necessary. Without war or a war machine, I think we'd be far more productive, and we'd have a much better standard of living on a global basis for humanity at large. That's how I really think.
Stay tuned. There's more to come in just a moment.
The Ellis Martin Report is sponsored by Wellgreen Platinum. Wellgreen Platinum is a Canadian mining exploration and development company focused on the active advancement of its 100% owned Wellgreen PGM and nickel project toward production. A 2015 economic assessment shows the Wellgreen project, located in the Canadian Yukon, to be potentially the second largest PGM producer outside Southern Africa and Russia, with average annual production of over 200,000 ounces platinum, palladium, and gold, along with 128 billion pounds of nickel and copper from just 34% of the pit-constrained resource, making it possibly one of the largest in the world. Estimates show that once in production with assets near or at the surface, this low-cost producer may generate cash flow exceeding as much as $330 million per year. Situated along a major highway in a mining-friendly jurisdiction with an active market for PGMs and nickel, and with a strong management team, Wellgreen is certainly to be considered a candidate for your portfolio. Find them on the web at wellgreenplatinum.com.
We follow those that like to be followed. Follow them yourself at ellismartinreport.com.
Switching over to robotics, a little bit of a shift here in topic, but not that much. We could take that war machine and turn it into a machine that's more useful for humanity, but if machines are making machines, then what do we do with ourselves, and how does that translate into money for everyone?
Well, these are really big questions, and I'm glad you're asking. I wish I had good answers for people. I have the same question. One, there's going to be some shift in the economic system at large that we're really watching before our eyes with the BRICS, for example, and the AIIB. I mean, there's a move away from the dollar that's been going on for some time. Will there always be a world reserve currency? We really don't know. Will there be a global currency? We really don't know. What we do know is that the human being is being usurped by these robots. Let's say, just take for an example, the transportation industry. Right now, with Google Maps and the GPS system, you can basically get in a car that will drive you just about anywhere with the software that's already available. So what that means is you can have transportation that doesn't require human beings. You could have no taxi cab drivers, no UPS drivers, no drivers that drive produce and oil and all the things that are on the road right now. In theory, in a few years, I'm not sure how many, let's say 5 as an example, all of those jobs will be lost. And those will be displaced workers. Where do they get jobs? So I'm agreeing with your point that there are going to be a lot of mouths to feed and not as many jobs to go around, possibly. There could be, I don't want to get my Austrian friends mad at me saying that, well, David, you're not preaching the Austrian school, that the market's going to find jobs, there will be new opportunities, and that I'm not overlooking that. What I'm stating is that in the present trends, there are disruptions. This could be one, and it could be a while before the quote-unquote the market found jobs for them. So what we really are looking at, in my view, is that there has to be a way to take care of these people that may not be able to find work, or there may not be a demand for their skill set or whatever. And that's a big problem because it already exists. You've got, 42 or 44 million people that are on food assistance in the United States. Can you imagine if anyone that's in the transportation industry, from a cab driver all the way up to an 18-wheeler, out of work in a short order? This is a big problem. And again, there aren't really a lot of solutions that I see. There might be others, but I've read a fair amount of the futurist stuff and where we're going and where we're going to end. No one has a real clear answer.
Well, with almost 94 million people, as I understand it, out of work right now, it's no wonder that these riots are happening. I'm sure there may be racial overtones and there may be definite reason why people are frustrated right now, but maybe the real reason is they're not working, they don't have enough money to eat, there's no jobs for them, and they're not coming anytime soon.
Well said. First of all, it's a humanity problem. It's not a racial problem. And not that that doesn't enter into it, but that's the elite trying to divide and conquer. It's this group against that group. It's this and that. No, if you go back to the Arab Spring, and I'll get to your point, that was not about geopolitics. That was about food. It was costing too much to eat. That's why those people are out in the street. But that's not what you heard from the mainstream financial press or the mainstream press. In our case here, a lot of it had to do, as you said, with basics. I can't get enough to sustain myself, or it's costing too much with this zero inflation rate, which is ridiculous. So people are, as Gerald Celente says, when you lose everything, you've got nothing left to lose, people lose it. And people feel that way. And so if you feel like I've got nothing else to lose, I am going to get out there in the street. What are they going to do? Put me in jail and feed me? Hey, maybe I'll go to the streets. I'm being slightly facetious. So that's what it's come to. And the trend is clear. So this non-recovery that they keep preaching as a recovery is only going to probably escalate, meaning that you're going to see more and more hot spots, quote unquote, in the summer months. And this is due to not because the weather's hot, it's because people have had it and they have lost it and are taken to the streets.
Why does the media have to telegraph this? I mean, I don't disagree with what you said, and it may or may not happen. It probably will. I don't like that I'm saying that. But shifting again here, I don't think necessarily broadcasting these thoughts and ideas about strife are a solution, and they're actually not helping the problem.
I agree. I mean, one thought I've had, and I think there's one or two out there, I haven't really researched them, but like the Positive News Network, just put out nothing but positive news all day long. Positive stuff that takes place every day. But the news, the yellow journalism that started basically in the Hearst dynasty, is all about negativity. And the doomier, the gloomier, the more bizarre, especially today, the more bizarre it can be. It's not so much as negative as bizarre. I mean, it's weird, freaky, off-the-wall things. I mean, let's talk transgender for a minute. I mean, transgender factually is about 1% of the population. Yet you hear about that aspect of the news is probably what, 15, 20%? So here's by actual fact, a 1% population that's getting news coverage of maybe 15% of the total news coverage. It doesn't jive. Is there an agenda behind it? Well, I would submit for your consideration, absolutely there's an agenda behind it. And this is the way that we've been programmed since the founding, really, of the propaganda machine, which has been around for quite some time. So we let the mainstream press, not me particularly, or you, Ellis, but I'm talking about many people, let the mainstream do their thinking for them. And if they hear a certain dialogue again and again and again, they start to either agree with it or they just kind of accept it, but without doing any fact-checking whatsoever.
And it winds up being a real distraction from the things we actually need to be talking about and thinking about and doing something about, correct?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what we really need to do is there isn't really many philosophical channels on the mainstream press, but there are in the alternative press, and not that philosophy is an answer to everything. But my suggestion is that people need to get to the core of what it means to be human and what it means to be them. I mean, the old adage of the Oracle of Delphi, to thine own self be true, has a lot of merit. I mean, if you're always seeking something outside of yourself, then you'll never be satisfied. That's why there's so much greed, because people are looking for something that they can never get. And of course, this is where religion comes in. But my view, and a studied one at that, I've taken world religion twice and I've studied on my own for quite a few years. The mainstream religion is basically out of sync with the population, almost any country you want to go to. And so a lot of people are looking for alternatives there as well. And of course, I don't mean to make this a religious or a philosophical discussion, but what I want to make as a point is that people are looking for truth. And one of the truths is that this debt paradigm is not working, and that honesty in the financial system works, honesty in the political system works, honesty in the religious system works. And we're barraged with a bunch of half-truths and obfuscation of actual real fact that would help people to really understand not only themselves, but reality at large. We're basically in a situation now, Ellis, and have been for quite some time, where nothing in the world works the way you think it does.
You know, it's interesting because you can almost say that nothing in life works the way you think it does. You have to, more or less, to survive in this world and in this life is to be open-minded and not try and storyboard or dictate how your future is going to be. You can have some general sense of direction and passion, but you can't plan out everything with so many unabsolutes or absolutes that you have no control over to deal with every day. It's really like a video game that we're living in. We are getting a bit philosophical. And you mentioned religion. Now, the problem that I have with religion, and whether we believe in God or not, is not the topic. It's not what we're discussing here. But religion, we're dealing with an archaic structure that's thousands of years old that has some relevant value in it. I imagine you could extract that from every religion. But what I think you're alluding to is dealing with the now, dealing with the reality, dealing with this present moment. How do we take this present moment and make sure that we're building something positive from it? That's really what we should be talking about.
I agree or tend to agree with what you said. I just want to assuage anybody because I don't think I've ever talked religion before of all the interviews I've done, and I've done many. And again, I just want to reassert to everyone, I am free market. So that goes along with the principles of the founding of this country, which means freedom of religion. So you can believe whatever you want to believe, and I have no problem with that. Just want to make that clear because the basis of what I believe, you should also honor that. If I'm going to be tolerant of any religion out there, and I should be if I say I am what I say I am, then you as well should reciprocate in kind. Not that everyone can or will, or they think they do and they don't, but regardless, away from the editorializing before I speak, definitely need to get back to the core. I mean, as we talked at the beginning of the interview, all religions say it's wrong to kill, yet here we go killing all the time. And yet you even say God's on this side or God's on that side. Well, God isn't for war. I'm for peace. I'm not against anything.
But isn't God being used as the excuse for war in many cases?
That's my whole point, is that they're using God, quote unquote, to justify certain actions in certain religions and certain situations that validate or vindicate in their mind the idea that God certainly wants it this way. And yet at the core ethics of the religion, you could find that that's not necessarily true. Now, I have studied the Muslim religion, and I know there's differences between the Sunnis and the Shiites, and I know that what Muhammad had to say about what you can do and not do is a man. That's not Allah saying it. And of course, there's been distortions, and I'm certainly not the religious scholar to take this much further. My point is that common sense tells you it's wrong to kill, and that religions purportedly, or at least most of them, advocate a nonviolent approach. And yet we have other religions out there that say, no. And I'm not just, it sounds like I'm picking on the Muslims. I'm not. I mean, you look at other historical events taking place, and there certainly were a backlash during the Crusades and what took place under the name of Christianity, etc. So there's a lot of God used in war, but you really want to step back and evaluate that and question, is that really true? Does God really want us to kill people?
And there's over 1 billion Muslims that are very peaceful and not engaging in war. So there's that, right?
Exactly. I mean, again, one of the main premises that probably doesn't get discussed enough about my philosophy and others, a few of us that think similar to how I do, is that it's the individual that we cherish. We cherish the fact that you are human. And because you are human, you have what's called natural rights. Whether you believe in God or not, you exist. If you believe you exist, you have natural laws. You could call them God-given. I choose to call them God-given, but you could call them natural rights. And that is to fully express yourself, who you are, as long as you don't do no harm. And so that means you have a great deal of freedom. But the other side is the statist attitude that you get your rights from the state, and they dictate exactly what you can and cannot do, where you can go, how much you can spend, what you can buy, spend your money on, et cetera, et cetera. So the individual is the one that is cherished in that state of mind or that philosophy. Whereas on the other hand, it's the collective. It's the idea that, he doesn't agree with us, but majority rules, and therefore get lost. You're not in a group, you're not in a club. You have to either conform or get out. And this type of mob rule or mob thinking. And that's what a collectivist attitude is, and it's been proven time and time again it doesn't work. But a lot of people believe that it does, and of course this is what state control is all about, is collectivist attitudes in one way, shape, or form. And this, of course, is part of the problem, because the individual can't be an individual anymore. I want to bring a point up that was brought up to me several years ago, and it gets people to think, or at least it got me to think, and that is, how many statues are there to a committee? There aren't. The statues are to, and I'm not a big fan, but Abraham Lincoln as an example, or Thomas Jefferson, or George Washington, or you could talk about Madame Curie, or you could talk about Gandhi, or you could talk of trying to get away from this U.S. founding or presidents. There's a lot of people that have done a lot of miraculous things, but those were individuals. And those individuals had the freedom to express, think, and do what they did. And a lot of them did it because they wanted to do it with no actual thinking about financial gain. They had such a passion that ran so deep that they felt it was their duty to bring these things forward. And that's the magic of being able to, as I go back and re-philosophize Ellis, to thine own self be true. If you really have a purpose, you have an inner core. If you develop what you really are, then these kinds of things can come out, but it's very rare that you see it come out. We're taught the collectivist attitude that you got to go along with the herd. Get in line, stand in line, be just like everyone else. Oh yeah, you get to have a different tattoo or something. You're such an individual. Well, this is really nonsense because most people are taught to believe what everyone else believes rather than have critical thinking.
Well, there's greater profit in being yourself. Would you not agree? Now, of course, we need other people to get things done. So you're finding like-minded people or people similar to you that can augment your skills to achieve a common goal where it's not state opted. It is really begins at a community level and grows from there. So again, being true to thyself actually is a way to financial freedom if you just remain on that path.
Well, it can be. And then cooperation to me is different than collective. If you want to cooperate, and I'm very good at cooperating with others in a lot of circumstances, not all. If it's something that I'm philosophically opposed to, obviously I'm not going to do it. To cooperate with somebody to help them build something. You jump out of the car, someone's stalled on the side of the road, they need a push. I'll jump out and help push that car. I mean, that's cooperation. It's almost spontaneous cooperation. That's different than having everybody have to do such and such or be such and such, etc. So there is a difference between cooperating. See, cooperating is based on volunteering, that you voluntarily give them your time, your money, your efforts. And of course, there are tribes. I use the word tribes. It's like, for example, in my dome, silver investors. I mean, how many silver investors are there? Well, there are not very many. And they consider that a tribe. And a lot of them have the same idea about the silver market, but they have a lot of different things because they're all individuals. So they might be together and cooperate for certain things relating to the silver market or producing silver or whatever, but they also have their freedom of expression in a lot of other areas of life that don't have anything to do with the silver market that I might not agree with.
Are we going to see more tribalism then in the future?
Well, you know, I've given this a great deal of thought as well, and I certainly don't know, but I have read a few studies. Again, no expert here. We're kind of just having a chat today. There seems to be sort of an optimum number kind of a thing. And what I mean by that is that a group of X amount seems to be optimum for everybody to be happy, be well fed, be cared for, feel loved, feel nurtured, feel that they have the freedom to express themselves. And then if you get too big, it's better if actually another group splinters off or that type of thing. And it depends what the circumstances are. In other words, there's an optimum for like office space and office workers. And I suggest there's an optimum for self-organizing communities. Oh, let's just go post the collapse if you believe there's going to be one. And I do believe there will be one. And how it manifests, no one knows for sure. But people have to cooperate more. And so they would cooperate mostly on location and their basic worldview and what their abilities are. So these things will actually take place and are pretty natural. But if a small group formed and they realize they don't have enough, manpower, they will entice others somehow or other to cooperate with them. So what I'm suggesting for everyone's consideration is that there is an optimum for a lot of systems and a cooperative system, a bunch of human beings working together as a community. There is an optimum for that. And of course, it also depends on what type of community. I mean, if you're making homes out of mud and rock, there would be a different optimum for that than if you're still in a high-tech world where you could do it with concrete and steel. But it's something to consider because when things get overcrowded or too big, the old too big to fail, well, what does that really mean? Too big to fail. Let's think about that for a moment.
Well, we had a discussion last time. We talked about a collapse based on energy or oil derivatives, and you forecasted something coming this month in the month of May. And I'm not going to ask you if you're still with that as we're into May. I'm going to say, as far as this collapse you mentioned, and we want to somehow end this on a positive note. Are we talking about this year, 5 years, 10 years, 2 years? What is your feel intuitively on something like that? Or do we just not know and we'll never know?
Well, the honest truth is no one knows. But, and I've stuck my neck out and I've had it chopped off because I've been wrong a few times, like many of us have. I mean, even Jim Sinclair. I mean, Jim got the top of the gold market almost to the day in the last bull market, and he made $1 million bet that proved him wrong. The point is that none of us get it right all the time. But I really think we've got to get into 2016, 2017. I do still think, and I was wrong by at least a year, because last year I said it would be a transition year, 2014. And maybe looking back in the history book, someone will say, yeah, that's when the shift took place in people's consciousness, and they started to realize that government was more of a burden than a help, and That's not how I see it right now. I see it as this year. And again, going back to the mainstream press, saying that there will be more uprisings or more heated developments during the summer months. If that does come about, that would be a clear indication that what I'm saying is true, that people have had it, they're fed up, they're taken to the streets, and it's because they are in a situation economically where they don't like it and they want to do something about it, but they don't know what to do. And that's the beginning of it moving further down the road, even while I'm sure the mainstream press will be saying unemployment's lower than ever, lower than it's been in 5 years, and happy days are here again, and the financial recovery is only getting better. And of course, those are empty, hollow words that most people will ignore and understand that something is drastically wrong, and they may not be able to articulate it, but they'll understand something's wrong and who's going to do something about it. And unfortunately, many people rely on Uncle Sam or Big Brother somewhere, their state government, state meaning national government, or even their local government, to do something. But really, these people are as powerless as any human being on an individual basis. And even on a collective basis, they might have the authority to do certain things, but to implement them, that's a different situation. We've seen the ability for large collectives to implement succinctly, and they cannot. You look at Katrina, you look at Sandy, you look at any of these weather events. Oh, they might get a little bit of help here and there, but they certainly aren't the panacea of, all I have to do is sit here and wait for them to help me. No, that's not what takes place. And as things break down further, they're not going to be there at all.
And yet, as we go along these events, although they don't affect everyone, will certainly dominate the news. Now, I want to refer back to something before we sign off here that we talked about at the beginning of the interview when we were talking automation and the robotics involved in our future. Who are the beneficiaries of that? I would think it would be a lot of these base metal and some precious metal mining companies and producers out there. And I would also think that some of this workforce can be retrained to continue to, or at least to begin building the infrastructure that's going to form our tomorrow world, so to speak.
Well, you're right. I was thinking as you were posing the question, my immediate thought was, of course, the corporations benefit because robots don't ask for a pension plan. They don't ask for a coffee break. They don't ask for overtime. So once you automate, we've really taken care of a lot of problems you have with people. When I got my business degree and went on, I was young and I certainly didn't know much. Not that I know a lot now. I've certainly got a lot of experience. It upset me to realize that the employee situation was one of the hardest things to manage and affected the bottom line so much. If your corporation is in trouble, one of the best things you can do from a financial only standpoint, not from a humanistic standpoint, is to fire people. And when I saw that, I didn't like it because I never thought about it before until I got into my master's program. But that's the bottom line. But coming back to what you suggest, yes, it will be important for the base metal miners. Most of these things take a pretty good amount of steel and specialty steels and special, rare earth elements and everything else in today's high-tech world. So there's a lot to be gained if we get more and more robotics down the road as far as the mining industry is concerned. Whether it would be immediate or not, remains to be determined.
David, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. A fascinating conversation today. We strayed off the typical path. We covered some subject matter that's definitely worth covering, at least for people like us. Thank you so much for joining me today on the program.
Well, my pleasure. I'll see what kind of responses we get from the listeners, because definitely stepped outside the main ideas that we usually speak about. But I'm glad to do so because, one, I believe what we voiced together and sounded off on gives people food for thought and also broadens a little bit of their thinking, perhaps, because a lot of this still does tie into the economics and the ability of one group to control another group, which is far from freedom. And of course, if you want to end on a happy note, I would say most people are far, far more able to do things that they've never conceived than they believe. I think that people could be educated to critically think and realize how powerful they really are, to overshoot, not undershoot. Most people don't have a strong enough belief of what their true capabilities are. And if that were impressed, I think, more along the educational lines than we currently see, a lot more people would be able to rise to that passion we talked about, or I was talking about statues to individuals. I think a lot more of those would be available.
It's a very, very nice point. I'm glad to end on it. And of course, individuals that we know that are successful in business and sports, that excel in gymnastics and things of that nature, all of our positive role models, they know very few limits, don't they?
That's right. Very true.
David, tell us how people can find you to comment on this broadcast.
Well, the easiest way is to get these broadcasts. We usually post them on our YouTube channel, which is called Silver Guru. And then if you want to just let us do all the work for you, get on our free email list. Just go to silver-investor.com. There'll be a pop-up menu that'll give you the ability to get on our free weekend reports. And then, of course, if you're inclined to learn the most you can about money, metals, and markets, you can get on the Morgan Report at 3 different levels, the basic, basic plus, and the mastermind level.
Thanks again for joining us today. Really appreciate it, David.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I've been speaking with the Silver Guru, David Morgan. His website is silver-guru.com or themorganreport.com. Listen to this segment again on the homepage of our website, ellismartinreport.com. or download the entire Ellis Martin Report on iTunes. The preceding segment is sponsored by Wellgreen Platinum, trading in the U.S. as WGPLF and on the TSX as WG. Located in the Yukon Territory, Canada, the Wellgreen project has the potential to become one of the world's largest and lowest-cost open-pit producers of platinum group metals and nickel. Find them on the web at wellgreenplatinum.com.